Hello. I actually didn't hate The Mandalorian and Grogu. Now, I fully went into this movie expecting Star Wars slop, but I was pleasantly surprised. Now, that being said, this is not gonna be exactly a glowing review. The movie isn't slop, but it is only a step above slop. It's somewhat good, but not great. And the thing is, it probably could have been better if the filmmakers had put in like 10% more effort, which is kind of frustrating. But when you compare this to similar movies, it's refreshing that they put in any effort at all. This movie was directed by Jon Favreau, and it was written by Favreau, Dave Filoni, and someone named Noah Clore. I have basically no idea who that last guy is. He has really no credited work outside of his work for The Mandalorian. Apparently he wrote every episode of The Book of Boba Fett, a show that I watched 2 episodes of and then deemed too bad to continue. And he also wrote 1 season 3 episode of The Mandalorian, a season of television that I also watched 2 episodes of and then deemed too bad to continue. Otherwise, his credits are pretty sparse, and every bio I can find of him does not have any other information about him. I have no clue where this guy came from. Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, on the other hand, are very visible to most Star Wars fans. Dave Filoni is the guy behind The Clone Wars and a bunch of other animated Star Wars shows, and has also recently been promoted to replace Kathleen Kennedy as head of Lucasfilm. Congrats to Dave. And Jon Favreau is Jon Favreau. He has directed a lot of popular movies, many of which you may have liked, and I probably didn't. Yeah, I'm really not usually a fan of Jon Favreau's movies, even the really popular ones that everyone seems to like. I don't have anything against the guy. I just tend to not like the stories that he tells. Now, both he and Dave Filoni have more or less been the face of The Mandalorian. They've been going on all the press tours for this movie, and they have been there since the very beginning for The Mandalorian. So most of the criticism that I'm going to be shooting at this movie is going to be directed to those 2 guys. And while both Filoni and Favreau have the potential for slop in them, which we have definitely seen before, it's pretty clear that they are both really passionate about filmmaking and about Star Wars, and their passion probably is what stops this from becoming slop. Now, do I get the impression that this is a story that these guys felt the need to tell and that they poured blood, sweat, and tears into? No, not in the slightest. But I do get the impression that when these guys showed up, they knew that they were not required to make anything really good and probably could have just made something vaguely watchable, but they decided to have a little bit of fun with it. Now, they were not interested in fine-tuning it and making the movie a lot better, but they did put in more effort than I imagine the people making the Minions movies do. And here's the thing. By design, that's kind of what this movie had to be. Because of the nature of what this movie is, a standalone adventure set in between 2 seasons of a supposedly still running TV show, they couldn't really do anything groundbreaking with it. You can't really write any substantial character arcs or change the status quo of the universe because there are people watching who maybe haven't seen the show, and there are people who watch the show who might not be able to make it out to see the movie. But what's weird about this is that they've already broken this rule. So in the season 2 finale of The Mandalorian gives away Grogu. He gives him to Luke Skywalker, which is what the first 2 seasons of the show had been building towards the entire time. Let's not do that. Do you wanna jump up? You wanna come up and sit with mommy? You wanna come up here? Yay! Oh no! The Mandalorian cares about Grogu, but his line of work is gonna keep putting him in danger, so he has to give him away to someone who can take care of him. He has to find where he belongs, and he does. He finds a Jedi who can teach him the ways of the Force. But then, when the Book of Boba Fett came out, and I stopped watching because I thought it was bad, suddenly I'm seeing screen grabs on my feed of Luke Skywalker, Mando, Ahsoka, and Boba Fett all sitting around with Grogu, and I find out that now all of a sudden the Mandalorian just like has Grogu again. They're back together again. What? And yeah, in the first episode of season 3 of The Mandalorian, he just has Grogu again, and they don't explain it. They change the status quo in between seasons. So the fact that they didn't do this for the movie means one of two things. Either they learned their lesson and they decided they were no longer going to make any changes to the status quo and the show's supplemental material, let's call it, or they have just completely given up on making these characters develop at all. And considering that The Mandalorian and Grogu essentially start this movie in the same place when I saw them last, even though I skipped most of season 3, I have a feeling that the correct answer is the second one. Now that being said, I am completely fine with this movie being what it is. To me, this is an acceptable entry into the baby's first Star Wars cinematic universe. Now, let's get into specifics. Part 1, the stuff I liked. So this movie is actually kind of what Solo, a Star Wars story, was supposed to be before they changed directors. If you don't know, that movie was originally supposed to be more of like a buddy comedy, and then Disney decided they wanted to care more about brand integrity, so they decided to instead just play it completely straight. Here, however, Filoni and Favreau seem much more interested in leaning into the more like ridiculous, campy aspects of Star Wars, and as a result, this movie is really funny and really weird. Now that said, The Mandalorian and Grogu does have a bit of a tone problem. There are some scenes that are a little dark for younger kids and others that they would just straight up find really frightening, but also a lot of this movie shows that they had kids in mind more than anyone else when they were making it. This movie prioritizes action above everything else, and so because of that, I kind of found myself just sitting back and enjoying the fun energy. The action scenes are all really dynamic. They have a lot of moving parts, making sure that every character has something to do. Grogu is as cute as ever, and for a lot of the movie, I was kind of sitting there wondering why Mando doesn't just hire a babysitter, but eventually I came to realize that Grogu also has more to offer than just being cute. His ability to use the Force and also his love for the Mandalorian help move the story forward, and it also helps our heroes in battle. Grogu is essentially a highly intelligent and powerful wizard trapped in a baby's body, and it's completely ridiculous, and Favreau really played it up for laughs, and it works really well. The best performance in the movie is hands down Martin Scorsese as whoever this guy is. I thought he was really funny, and I liked that they appeared to blend like a real life puppet with CGI for this character. It looked really cool. I loved that they decided to make Rada the Hutt hashtag not like the other Hutts. No, there were a lot of missed opportunities here because of this. There were a lot of directions that I think they could have gone with this. However, I do like that they decided to do something different with one of the Hutts for once. It was very refreshing, and I thought it was fun, and I liked it. This is not the first movie where Rada the Hutt has been kidnapped and the protagonists have to go save him. And I'm getting a little worried for him. He should probably set up like a security alarm system, maybe a Ring doorbell. But out of the two movies where this happens, I vastly prefer this one. But pretty much every Hutt we've seen is exactly the same. They are all just like Jabba. They are fat, lazy, and evil. But Rada is none of those things. He actually makes it a point to avoid these tendencies and not be like the other Hutts in the family. This was something different for a change, and I really like that dynamic. Finally, I, of course, have to mention all of the glup shittos that this movie resurrects, namely my favorite, Babu Frick. I was just at Disney World right before I made this, and I got a little Babu Frick shoulder friend. I don't know if this one is actually supposed to be Babu Frick, because I know that this is for The Mandalorian and Grogu, and I don't think any of those are supposed to be actually Babu Frick. I think those are just other Babu Fricks in the species, and I don't know what they're called, so if you're like a Wikipedia moderator, I'm very sorry, but I am just gonna keep calling him Babu Frick. I'm gonna put him on my shoulder. My little friend! I love him so much. He's so ugly. I love him. Next we get into part 2, the weird stuff. This is just all of the stuff that I noticed that, like, I guess it's notable, but like I don't have any particular negative or positive feelings about. I just like noticed it and thought it was weird. I had assumed before this that the Hutts just couldn't speak English. I think There might have been one Hutt in the Clone Wars that spoke English. I think it was supposed to be like Jabba's cousin. But I think what happened for this movie is they realized that they were going to be giving Rada the Hutt a lot of screen time, and they realized that it would be really inconvenient for the audience to have to read like a third of the dialogue in the movie. For one thing, a lot of people just don't like subtitles, and for another thing, if you are targeting this movie towards kids, it's going to be pretty bad when like a solid half of your audience can't actually read. So I will give the writers credit for how they chose to handle this. When we are first introduced to Rada's aunt and uncle, the first Hutts that we see in the movie, they speak exclusively in Huttese. Then, about halfway through the conversation, maybe a little towards the end, one of them throws in like one line of dialogue that's in English. And then a few minutes later, we are introduced to Rada, who speaks entirely in English. First, they show us what we're used to, then they ease us into the changing of the status quo, and then later, they just go full into what the new status quo is going to be. This to me shows that the writers had the audience in mind when they were writing the dialogue for the Hutts and wrote it in a very specific way so that the audience would not be confused or annoyed. And like, this is what I'm talking about when I say they clearly did not put in the absolute barest minimum. There is effort here that they did not have to go through. They could have just been like, the Hutts are speaking English now, no more Huttese. So now I'm just assuming that the Hutts can speak English, but they choose not to, and this actually makes sense for their characters, you know? They are rich and they are lazy and evil, so they don't want to bother to put in the effort to speak a language that they understand but is not their first language. And since Rada is not like this, and since most of the other characters are speaking English, he just speaks English all the time. So yeah, the Hutts speak a lot of English in this movie, and it's kind of weird, but the way they went about it was good. Dave Filoni has a cameo in this movie. Fine, you're the Lucasfilm big boy now, and you've been making Star Wars shows for like 15 years. That's a lot more self-restraint than I would have shown. What the hell, sure. I got the impression while watching this movie that the filmmakers believed that a lot of people would be watching this who have never seen Star Wars before, like even the show that it's based on. And like, honestly, I don't know, I'm a little confused by that. Maybe it's just because it was a standalone Star Wars movie and you don't really have to know about Star Wars to watch this. I don't know, I kind of have a hard time believing that a lot of people saw this who have never seen a single Star Wars before. There's no opening crawl for this one, but there is like opening text that basically reads like the pitch for the show. Like, it just tells us exactly what we would already know if we have seen the show, or if we have even heard of the show and know anything about the Star Wars timeline. There's also a scene where Mando explains in like a lot of detail exactly who the Hutts are, and it was explained in enough detail where I'm like, wait, do they think there's a lot of people watching this who don't know that Jabba the Hutt was a bad guy? Hold on, I just realized it's Pride Month, and you cannot really see my bisexual flag very well. Hold on. That's better. Like, I don't know, I guess Grogu is popular enough that people would want to just watch for him because, like, they've seen the memes and they think he's cute. I don't know. Let me know in the comments if you're, like, not a Star Wars person, but watch this movie anyway. Like, I don't know. For some reason, I'm just, like, really having a hard time believing that there's a lot of people who watch this movie who have never seen Star Wars before. There's this, like, cyborg bounty hunter mini boss that I guess was in like one episode of the Clone Wars. I hadn't seen that one. My boyfriend had to tell me about it, but I don't know. Maybe that will excite some of you if you still haven't seen this movie a month after it came out for some reason. There also was this like sidekick alien guy who toted Mando and Grogu around from mission to mission. I have no idea who he is. It is completely possible that he is introduced in season 3 and that I just missed that. So maybe I did miss one thing from season 3. And finally, the secondary villain of this movie, we are told about for the first time off screen, and then when we meet him, it is revealed that he is just some guy. But it's not really framed in a way where it's supposed to like subvert your expectations. but it's also not framed in a way that makes him look particularly menacing either. So like the second biggest, baddest villain of this movie is just some guy. Part 3, the stuff I don't like. My first and honestly biggest complaint is that there was just a lot of missed opportunities here. Like I said earlier, because of the nature of this movie, they couldn't really fit in a lot of character arcs, they couldn't really change the status quo, but there are a few status quo changes in character arcs that I think really could have worked here. The biggest wasted opportunity is that of Rada the Hutt. In fact, you could make the argument that there is a character arc that is set up for him, but it's never really paid off. When we are first introduced to Rada, he spells out very clearly for us that he is sick of living in the shadow of his father, and that, you know, he wants to write his own destiny. He wants to follow his own path. He does not want to be like the other Hutts. He doesn't want to be a criminal gangster. He wants to abide by some sort of moral code. And at the start of the story, Rada's attempts at self-actualization are really not going very well. He technically has not been kidnapped, but he is under the ownership of some guy, and Rada thinks that some guy is gonna let him go once he finishes off his last fight and pays him what he owes him, but actually some guy is planning on just killing him off at the end. So once this happens and Mando and Rada narrowly escape, Mando is gonna go take him to his aunt and uncle because that's the deal that he has entered into, and Rada's like, no dude, they're gonna kill me. And Mando's like, what? No, they told me to come and rescue you, and they told me that when I bring you back to them, they're gonna give me information about this Imperial officer that I'm trying to kill. And Rada's like, that Imperial officer? That's literally just some guy. We just saw him. So Mando finds some guy and arrests him, and he lets Rada go in exchange for the information. But then Rada and Mando get kidnapped by Rada's aunt and uncle. So now Mando and Grogu have to go rescue Rada, and this is what kicks off our whole string of missed opportunities. Missed opportunity number 1, confronting his aunt and uncle. So Rada's been knocked unconscious, and he wakes up and he saves Grogu from being eaten by his aunt and uncle. So in the chaos, he's like punching them, and he starts like punching them like into the floor, and the floor starts breaking through, and he keeps going, knowing that he's gonna be going down with them. So then they fall through, and Grogu uses the Force to lift up Rada the Hutt and save him, while the evil aunt and uncle are then eaten by the sea monster that is underneath the pit that they fell through. So there's missed opportunity number 1, just have Rada be the one to kill his aunt and uncle instead of the sea monster. Then the Hutt's droid army starts breaking down the door to come and kill them. Missed opportunity number 2, Rada is now the undisputed heir to Jabba's empire. So now that the aunt and uncle are dead, he is in charge of the droids. He can just say, actually stop, you answer to me now, don't kill us. But no, they just run away. So the characters are running away and they find the exit, but it's a dead end. And by dead end, I mean there is a very clear exit that's just on the other side of like half a layer of very thin wall. Missed opportunity number 3. We have already established that Rada the Hutt is swole and shredded and has brute strength, and he can use that brute strength to just knock the wall down. But no, the Mandalorian does it for him. Then, after removing the barrier, it's revealed that there is no way out from this exit, and it's just a straight cliff down to a body of water. Missed opportunity number 4, the biggest missed opportunity. Instead of having Rada take the literal and figurative leap of faith and self-actualizing, jumping off of this cliff and maybe grabbing the Mandalorian and Grogu so that he, like, you know, dives down like this and they can land on top of him or something. No, the Mandalorian, like, peer pressures him into jumping off and almost, like, pushes him off the cliff so that they can all survive. So rather than having Rada self-actualize and take the leap of faith, the Mandalorian is like, no dude, you have to jump. Just jump, dude. You gotta do it. And Rada's like scared. Like, I don't know, guys. It's a long way down. So yeah, for some reason, Baby Yoda has more agency than this one-off character who has half an arc. Why? The other status quo change that I think you can reasonably put in between seasons would be having Baby Yoda learn to talk. This would have been a really good way to have the audience feel like they didn't just waste 2 hours of their life because something important actually happened. And the people who watch the show but miss the movie for some reason can tune into the next season and be like, oh, I guess he just talks now. He must have started to do that in the movie. And what's especially noticeable about this movie is that all of the characters kind of talk the same, which I'll talk more about later, but Yoda, the character that this character is based on, very famously does not speak the same way as everyone else. And so maybe you could say that it's like, I don't know, like the way that their brains work or something, and they have to have a backwards sentence structure, and so now you can have one character who does not speak the same way as everyone else. And it would also be really cute to have a baby try to form sentences in the same way that Yoda does. It would be adorable, actually. Give it to me, Disney. I want it. You don't even have to have him try to speak in complete sentences. Just maybe have him start calling the Mandalorian like Daddy or Papa, because he has now claimed him as his father figure, and it would be really cute. One place where this would have been needed was this abhorrently long scene. It was like a 10 to 15 minute sequence of Baby Yoda like tending to the Mandalorian's wound and like hoping that he'll wake up from his coma. That would have been a nice way to cap it off, but no. And that leads me to the pacing. Yeah, this movie is about 30 minutes too long, and the pacing is really weird. The last half of this movie probably should have taken up about 20-25 minutes, and instead it takes up an entire hour. And there is so much stuff in that last hour that does not need to be there. It does not serve the story at all. And then there's the dialogue in this movie. Like I said earlier, every character talks the exact same way. And it's not even like it's a Joss Whedon type thing, or like it's The Social Network where everyone is quipping. No, no one is quipping. It all reads like it was like the first draft of the script. There's nothing punchy or fun about the way that these characters talk, except for a few lines that the Mandalorian says that he already says in the TV show. Notably, I can bring you in warm, or I can bring you in cold. That's an iconic line, but we've already heard him say it before. Otherwise, characters are basically just telling the audience what happened. There is no show don't tell in this movie, and there is no room for interpretation or subtlety. I think Marcus from the Cosmonaut Variety Show YouTube channel put it best when he said that all of these characters talk like video game NPCs, and it really doesn't help that all of the actors are phoning it in really hard. Like even Sigourney Weaver and Pedro Pascal, who I have seen some really incredible acting from. They're probably some of the best working actors right now. They just don't sound like they want to be there. Like, I cannot stress enough how little they care in their reading of these lines. And then there's Jeremy Allen White, who doesn't even sound like himself in this movie. I will say he's at least making choices while the other actors are not. It sounds like he's kind of putting on this like frat boy voice, which I guess makes sense since this version of Rada the Hutt is like a jock now. But it is kind of weird that you would cast a really famous actor in a voice role when he doesn't really do a lot of voice work, and then you don't have him use his voice. And lastly, I have to talk about this absolutely abysmal color grading and sometimes really bad editing. I will say most of the time the editing was fine, it was serviceable, but there were just a few moments in some of these action sequences where I just genuinely had no clue what was going on, and I'm honestly not even sure if it was bad editing or because the color grading was just so muddy that it was really difficult to tell the differences between like who some of the characters were. They blended into all of the backgrounds. It was honestly a mess. There's one scene where there's these like 4 Babu Frick types running in this like sewer tunnel situation, and it cuts to one of them like running into this big monster, and then it very quickly cuts away, and like I fully thought that one of them just got eaten by this monster, and then he just appeared later, and it wasn't even a fake out like, oh yay, we tricked you, actually he's not dead, triumphant music playing, and like No, it was just a bad editing choice because he's just there again. It was especially bad in the big, like, arena fight scene. At first, it kind of looked like the arena scene from Thor Ragnarok, where the lighting is really, like, dim, but it's like that on purpose because all of the characters have, like, really bright coloring and really bright paint on, and the big bad guys who are watching from above are very visually separated from everyone because they're in this bright red room and they're all wearing really bright colors. And it's also really easy to tell who the two fighters are because one is the Hulk and the other is Thor. But already, when it was just the Mandalorian fighting Rada, there were already a few issues with this because, like I said, all of the colors are really muddy and samey. Everything is like the same shade of gray or brown. Actually, I can use Babu Frick here to help me out really well here. Pretty much everything was this shade of gray that Babu is, and all of the browns were this shade of brown. Every single shade that you can find on Babu Frick is the only 4 shades that were in this movie. And every single character was some combination of these 4 shades. But then later, the Mandalorian quits because he doesn't want to fight Rada because his job is to bring Rada back. And so then he automatically gives Rada the win, and Rada's like, so I can go now, right? And of course, some guy is like, no, actually, I'm trying to kill you. So then he brings out all of these monsters, and it kind of feels like it's supposed to be a callback to Attack of the Clones when there are all of the monsters in that arena setting. You can even see later there's a bunch of monsters that some guy has like the heads of in his office, and one of them is like the weird tiger thing from Attack of the Clones. I thought that was a nice touch. But then all of these monsters come out, and it's not like there's like one monster per character to fight like it was in Attack of the Clones. There's just like a lot of them, and they each have to kind of like split off and try to fight them. But like you can't tell any of them apart. Like, yes, they all are different sizes and they all have different things about them that separate them. But like I said, they are all the same color. And because there are so many of them, it's really hard to keep track of them and who's fighting what in one given moment. It was really disappointing because it was otherwise a really good, enjoyable scene, but it was just really hard for me to tell the difference between all of these big creatures that they're trying to fight. Which is kind of a bad thing when the entire point of the scene was look at all of these creatures that they're fighting now. Oh no! I was so close to. This video is almost done. So yeah, that's basically it. I get the impression that Filoni and Favreau are 2 guys who are really passionate about their craft, but that also doesn't really always show in the final product, and this is another example of that. It is certainly a step above something like the Lion King reboot, but it is on the same tier as like the Jungle Book reboot, in my opinion. And like, I'm not even gonna touch Elf and Iron Man because if I do, I will definitely get canceled. Maybe not by a lot of people, but definitely by like Mel's sister from The Pit. I remember the day that Jeremy Allen White being cast as Rada the Hutt was announced, and it was only the second funniest thing that happened that day because that was the day that Luigi Mangione got arrested. You like Babu Frick? Yeah, you like Babu Frick? Hey, hey, hey! That was a really bad Babu Frick impression. I am so sorry. But then, when the Book of Boba Fett came out, and I stopped watching... What did you find? No! Stop it. I don't know what you have, but stop. No! Hey, what is that? What is it? Is it just the... Is just the bobby pin? Okay. Oh, no! This guy does not stay on as well as the Porg, which is a little disappointing.